It was a crisp morning in Washington, D.C., and Jasmine Crockett was feeling on top of the world. She had just wrapped up a press conference where she spoke passionately about her plans to bring change to her community. Her fiery speeches always got people talking, whether they agreed with her or not. Some called her bold. Others thought she was too ambitious. But one thing no one could deny was that Jasmine knew how to make an impact. Behind closed doors, though, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Jasmine's rise to fame hadn't been without its share of challenges or secrets. There were whispers floating around Capitol Hill, rumors that painted her in a less than flattering light. People talked about questionable financial decisions, cozy relationships with lobbyists, and campaign funds being used for personal luxuries. But these were just whispers, right? Nobody had proof, until now. Across the country, Marjorie Taylor, Greene sat at her desk, scrolling through documents on her laptop. A smirk played on her lips as she went over emails, invoices, and photos that tied Jasmine to some shady dealings. Marjorie wasn't exactly known for playing nice either, but this time, she felt like she had struck gold. For weeks, she'd been digging into Jasmine's past, piecing together bits of information that would blow the lid off everything. That evening, both women prepared for what seemed like another routine political debate. Neither realized how explosive it would turn out to be. Jasmine arrived at the studio early, wearing her signature power suit and flashing confident smiles at the crew members setting up cameras and microphones. She greeted her opponent cordially before taking her seat, exchanging polite small talk about the weather and upcoming legislation. On the surface, there was nothing unusual. Just two politicians ready to hash out their differences live on air. Marjorie, however, carried herself differently. She walked in with purpose, clutching a thick folder under her arm. Her eyes scanned the room as if sizing up the situation. When she finally took her place across from Jasmine, there was an unmistakable tension in the air. The moderator introduced the topic of the night, healthcare reform, but everyone watching could sense something bigger brewing beneath the surface. As the debate began, Jasmine held her own, delivering sharp responses and quoting statistics, effortlessly. She was good at this game, and she knew it. Marjorie listened intently, nodding occasionally but saying little. It almost felt like she was biding her time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And then, halfway through the program, it happened. Interrupting Jasmine mid-sentence, Marjorie leaned forward, her voice cutting through the noise. "You know," she said calmly but firmly, "we can keep pretending this is just a policy discussion, or we can address the real issue here." With that, she opened the folder she'd brought along and pulled out a stack of papers. The camera zoomed in as Marjorie started reading aloud. Email exchanges showed Jasmine discussing campaign funds with someone who clearly wasn't part of her official team. Invoices detailed extravagant purchases, luxury vacations, designer clothes, all paid for using money meant for her constituents. Photos captured secret meetings with individuals linked to corporate scandals. Each revelation hit harder than the last, leaving viewers stunned. Jasmine froze, her face draining of color. For a split second, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then, recovering slightly, she tried to laugh it off. "This is ridiculous," she said, forcing a smile. "These are baseless accusations meant to distract from my work." But Marjorie didn't flinch. Instead, she kept going, unveiling more evidence until the entire studio buzzed with disbelief. Social media erupted almost instantly. Clips of the confrontation flooded platforms, sparking heated debates among users. Supporters of both sides weighed in, defending or condemning the revelations. By the end of the segment, millions of Americans had tuned in, making it one of the most watched political debates in recent history. For Jasmine, the calm she'd felt earlier that day had vanished completely. As the credits rolled and the cameras stopped rolling, she sat silently in her chair, staring blankly ahead. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on her shoulders. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a storm that would test her resilience and expose far more than she ever imagined. The debate had barely reached its halfway point, but the tension in the studio was already unbearable. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to gasp, clap, or simply process what they were witnessing. Marjorie Taylor Greene wasn't holding back anymore. She leaned forward into the microphone, her voice steady but sharp as she read out another email that painted Jasmine Crockett in an even worse light. "This one's dated last year," Marjorie said, raising her eyebrows for dramatic effect. "It's from someone claiming to represent a major lobbying group. They're offering, let's call it financial support, in exchange for certain legislative favors." Her tone dripped with sarcasm as she emphasized the phrase, financial support. Jasmine, who had been gripping the edge of the table tightly, finally managed to find her voice. "You're twisting words and taking things out of context," she snapped, her face flushed with anger. But the damage was done. The audience could see the cracks forming in her carefully constructed facade. Even the moderator looked uneasy, glancing between the two women as if unsure how to steer the conversation back on track. Marjorie wasn't satisfied yet. She pulled up screenshots of text messages on her phone and held them up for the cameras. "These are direct communications between you and this lobbyist," she said, pointing at the screen. "And look here, this message talks about keeping things quiet. Care to explain what that means?" The room fell silent except for the hum of the studio lights above. Jasmine shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her earlier confidence replaced by something closer to panic. She tried to deflect again, accusing Marjorie of doctoring evidence and fabricating lies. "This is all part of your smear campaign against me," she shot back, her voice rising slightly. "You've always hated me because I stand for real change while you pander to extremists." But Marjorie didn't flinch. If anything, she seemed energized by the chaos. She smirked confidently before delivering another blow. "Oh, this isn't personal," she said coolly. "I'm just showing people who you really are, because apparently your constituents deserve to know where their hard-earned money is going." At this point, the crowd couldn't stay quiet any longer. Gasps echoed through the studio, followed by murmurs of disbelief. Some viewers clapped in approval while others shook their heads in shock. Social media erupted instantly, with hashtags like #ExposedLive trending within minutes. People weighed in from every corner of the internet, debating whether Jasmine was guilty or if Marjorie had gone too far. Backstage after the show, Jasmine paced furiously in her dressing room. Her team huddled around her, whispering frantically about damage control. One assistant suggested issuing a statement denying everything, while another advised waiting until the dust settled before responding publicly. But Jasmine wasn't listening. She slammed her fist on the table, scattering papers everywhere. "How dare she do this to me?" she muttered under her breath, pacing faster now. "She thinks she can ruin my career, my life, over some fake documents." Her frustration boiled over when she grabbed a bottle of water and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall with a loud thud, leaving a wet stain behind. Her staff exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to calm her down. They'd never seen her like this. So unhinged, so visibly shaken. This wasn't the composed leader they'd grown accustomed to seeing, on TV or at rallies. Meanwhile, outside the studio, reporters gathered in droves, shouting questions and shoving microphones toward anyone who stepped out. Cameras flashed nonstop as journalists scrambled to get reactions from both sides. Marjorie predictably embraced the spotlight. As she exited the building, she stopped briefly to address the crowd. "I did what needed to be done," she told them, smiling broadly. "People deserve transparency, and I won't apologize for exposing corruption when I see it." Her bold declaration drew cheers from some reporters and groans from others, but there was no denying the buzz she'd created. That night, Jasmine retreated to her hotel room, unable to sleep. She scrolled endlessly through social media, watching videos of herself unraveling during the debate. Every comment section was filled with criticism and mockery. Some called her incompetent, others labeled her dishonest. Even her closest allies seemed hesitant to defend her outright. Around midnight, she decided to fight back. Sitting cross-legged on her bed, she recorded a video addressing her supporters, or whoever still believed in her. In the clip, she denied all accusations, calling Marjorie a liar and vowing legal action against her. At first, the message sounded measured and calm, but as she continued, Her emotions got the better of her. "You think you can destroy my reputation? With lies?" she yelled, tears streaming down her face. "Well, guess what? I'm not backing down. I've worked too hard for this, and I will prove everyone wrong." Her rant went viral almost immediately, but not for the reasons she hoped. Instead of rallying support, it only fueled more ridicule. Critics pointed out how defensive and erratic she sounded, further damaging her credibility. By morning, the story dominated headlines nationwide. News anchors dissected every moment of the debate, analyzing facial expressions, body language, and word choices. Political analysts debated whether Jasmine could recover from such a public meltdown. Meanwhile, Marjorie appeared on multiple talk shows, doubling down on her claims and presenting additional evidence to bolster her case. "She had her chance to come clean," Marjorie said during one interview. "Instead, she chose to attack me and deny the truth. That tells you everything you need to know about her character." As the day wore on, Jasmine found herself increasingly isolated. Calls from friends and colleagues dwindled, and those who did reach out offered little comfort. One longtime mentor sent a text advising her to step away from the spotlight temporarily, suggesting a break might help clear her head. Another ally suggested hiring a crisis manager to handle the growing scandal. But none of it mattered to Jasmine. She felt betrayed, cornered, and furious. What started as a routine political debate had spiraled into a full-blown media circus, and while Marjorie basked in the attention, Jasmine struggled to keep her world from collapsing around her. For the first time in her career, she realized how fragile power truly was, and how easily it could slip away. By the third day after the explosive debate, Jasmine Crockett was a woman on the edge. The scandal wasn't just lingering, it was growing, spreading like wildfire across every corner of the media landscape. Every news outlet seemed to have something new to say about her, and none of it was good. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications from social media, emails, and text messages, but most of them weren't supportive. Instead, they were filled with harsh criticism, mockery, or outright calls for her resignation. Jasmine tried to keep up appearances, putting on a brave face in front of her staff and supporters. But behind closed doors, she was unraveling. She hadn't slept properly since the debate, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if more evidence surfaced? What if people she trusted turned against her? What if this ruined not only her career but also her reputation forever? Her team wasn't helping much either. They huddled in meetings that often ended in raised voices and slammed doors. Some advisors urged her to issue another apology, this time more sincere and less defensive. Others suggested going completely silent, letting the storm pass before attempting any kind of comeback. But Jasmine couldn't agree with anyone. She felt trapped, unsure of whom to trust or what move to make next. Late one night, sitting alone in her home office, Jasmine stared at the stack of documents her legal team had sent over. It contained copies of everything Marjorie Taylor Greene had exposed during the debate: emails, invoices, photos, all neatly organized into folders labeled compromising evidence. Each page felt like a punch to the gut, reminding her of decisions she now regretted. Some of those choices had seemed harmless at the time, small shortcuts taken under pressure. Others were deliberate actions meant to secure an advantage in a competitive world. Now, though, they loomed over her like shadows too big to escape. The stress started manifesting physically. Dark circles formed under her eyes, and her usually polished appearance began to slip. During interviews, she fidgeted, nervously, avoiding direct eye contact with reporters. Her once commanding voice wavered as she struggled to explain herself. Even her closest friends noticed the change. One evening, a longtime confidant called to check on her. Over the phone, Jasmine broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "I don't know how much more I can take," she admitted between tears. "It's like everyone has turned against me overnight. People who used to cheer for me are now calling me corrupt. How did it get this bad?" Her friend tried to offer words of encouragement, urging her to stay strong and focus on clearing her name. But deep down, even they weren't sure how realistic that was anymore. The tide of public opinion had shifted dramatically, and reversing it would require more than just damage control. It would need a miracle. Meanwhile, Marjorie Taylor Greene continued to dominate the headlines. She appeared on morning shows, late-night talk programs, and podcasts, always armed with fresh talking points about accountability and transparency. Her strategy was simple: keep the pressure on until Jasmine cracked completely. And judging by recent events, it seemed to be working. Marjorie's confidence only grew as she gained traction among both supporters and critics. Some praised her for exposing corruption, while others accused her of playing politics dirty. Either way, she remained unbothered, shrugging off accusations of opportunism with practiced ease. In interviews, she framed herself as a crusader for truth, someone willing to risk backlash to hold powerful figures accountable. She might be angry now, Marjorie said during one televised appearance, referring to Jasmine. But anger doesn't erase facts. If anything, her reaction proves we're onto something real. As the days passed, Jasmine's behavior became increasingly erratic. She alternated between lashing out at perceived enemies and retreating into isolation. On social media, she posted lengthy rants defending herself, accusing everyone from rival politicians to journalists of conspiring against her. These posts often lacked coherence, jumping from one topic to another without clear logic. Critics seized on these moments, using them as proof that she was losing grip on reality. One particularly chaotic post went viral after Jasmine accused a prominent news anchor of fabricating stories about her. "You think you can drag my name through the mud because you don't agree with my policies," she wrote. "Well, guess what? I'm still here and I'm not backing down." The comment section exploded with replies, many mocking her inability to address the actual allegations. Some users shared memes poking fun at her meltdown, further fueling the ridicule. Even her attempts to shift blame backfired spectacularly. During a live interview, she tried to deflect attention by pointing fingers at other politicians accused of similar misconduct. "Why is everyone focusing on me when there are bigger fish to fry?" she demanded, her voice rising with frustration. "What about all the others who've done worse things and gotten away with it?" The interviewer pressed her for specifics, but Jasmine hesitated, unable to provide concrete examples. Her stammering response only made her look guiltier, reinforcing the narrative that she was desperate and cornered. Backstage after the interview, her team confronted her about her performance. "We need to rethink our approach," one advisor said bluntly. "This isn't working. You're coming across as defensive and unstable." Jasmine bristled at the criticism. "So what am I supposed to do, just roll over and let them destroy me?" "No," the advisor replied calmly. "But fighting fire with fire isn't helping either. We need a better plan, a smarter one." For the first time, Jasmine considered stepping away from the spotlight temporarily. Maybe taking a break would give her space to regroup and strategize. But the thought of disappearing felt like admitting defeat, something she wasn't ready to do. Instead, she doubled down, vowing to fight harder despite the mounting odds. As the week drew to a close, it became clear that Jasmine's situation was spiraling out of control. Allies distanced themselves publicly, fearing association with someone embroiled in such controversy. Donors pulled their support, leaving her campaign finances in jeopardy. Calls for her resignation grew louder, echoing across editorial pages and social media feeds alike. Through it all, Marjorie watched from afar, basking in the chaos she'd created. Whether viewed as a hero or a villain, one thing was undeniable. She had succeeded in shaking up the political arena, and in doing so, exposed vulnerabilities in those who thought they were untouchable. For Jasmine, the battle was far from over. But as each day passed, it became harder to see a path forward. The calm she'd once exuded had vanished entirely, replaced by desperation and fear. And as the world watched, waiting to see what move she'd make next, one question lingered in everyone's mind. Could she survive this storm, or was it already too late? By the start of the fourth day, the cracks in Jasmine Crockett's foundation were impossible to ignore. What had begun as a scandal was now a full-blown crisis, threatening not just her career, but her entire identity. People she once considered allies began distancing themselves publicly. Key donors who had supported her campaigns for years pulled their funding, citing concerns about her integrity. Some even released statements condemning her alleged actions, painting her as someone unworthy of trust. It wasn't just outsiders turning their backs on her. People within her inner circle started slipping away too. Her closest advisor, someone who had been with her since the early days of her political journey, resigned abruptly. In a scathing public statement, he claimed that he had repeatedly warned Jasmine about her questionable practices but was ignored every time. "I can no longer stand by and watch as someone I believed in tarnishes the values we fought for," he wrote. His words stung deeply, cutting through any remaining confidence Jasmine clung to. The media frenzy only intensified. Reporters camped outside her house, snapping photos of her leaving for meetings or running errands. Every move she made became fodder for speculation. Was she going to surrender? Was she planning a counterattack? Or was she simply trying to disappear quietly? Jasmine tried to put up a brave front during interviews, insisting that she was innocent and framing herself as a victim of a smear campaign. But her defenses sounded hollow, lacking conviction. Even her most loyal supporters struggled to reconcile the woman they admired with the figure being portrayed in the headlines. One longtime fan posted online saying, "I want to believe her, but it's getting harder to ignore all the evidence." Her social media presence, once a source of strength, turned into a liability. Every post she made drew thousands of comments, most of them negative. Critics mocked her attempts to defend herself, calling her explanations weak and inconsistent. Memes mocking her meltdown went viral, further humiliating her. One particularly cruel meme showed a split image. On one side, Jasmine confidently addressing a rally. On the other, her face frozen mid-rant during the debate. The caption read, "From powerhouse to punchline." Desperate to regain control, Jasmine decided to hold a press conference. She rented out a small auditorium, hoping to address the allegations head-on and clear her name once and for all. Her team worked tirelessly to prepare talking points, rehearsing answers to potential questions. They encouraged her to strike a balance between contrition and defiance, urging her to admit minor mistakes while denying any major wrongdoing. On the morning of the press conference, Jasmine arrived wearing a tailored suit, her hair perfectly styled. She looked calm and composed, at least on the surface. As reporters filed into the room, she took a deep breath, reminding herself why she had chosen this path in the first place. She wanted to make a difference, to fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves. This scandal didn't define her, she told herself. It was just a hurdle, albeit a massive one. When the cameras started rolling, Jasmine stepped up to the podium. Her voice trembled slightly as she began speaking. "First and foremost, I want to thank everyone who has stood by me during this incredibly difficult time," she said, glancing briefly at her team seated in the front row. "There have been many accusations leveled against me recently, and I want to take this opportunity to set the record straight." For the next 20 minutes, Jasmine walked the audience through her version of events. She admitted to making some poor financial decisions, describing them as honest mistakes rather than deliberate acts of corruption. "Yes, I used campaign funds to cover personal expenses," she confessed, her voice cracking. "But it was never my intention to deceive anyone. I was under immense pressure, juggling responsibilities, and I let things slip through the cracks. For that, I am truly sorry." She denied any involvement in illegal lobbying activities, dismissing those claims as baseless rumors spread by her opponents. "These accusations are politically motivated," she insisted, her tone firmer now. "They're designed to distract from the real issues affecting our communities. I won't allow myself to be silenced by lies." As expected, the press conference sparked mixed reactions. Some viewers appreciated her willingness to acknowledge fault, however minor. Others dismissed her apology as insincere, pointing out that she hadn't provided concrete proof to refute the damning evidence presented by Marjorie Greene. Commentators dissected every word Jasmine said, analyzing her body language and tone for signs of deception. Behind the scenes, Jasmine felt drained. Holding the press conference had taken everything out of her, emotionally, mentally, and physically. She returned home that evening, collapsing onto her couch in exhaustion. Her phone buzzed nonstop with messages from well-meaning friends offering condolences and advice. But none of it brought her comfort. All she could think about was how much ground she'd lost in such a short amount of time. Meanwhile, Marjorie continued to dominate the narrative. She appeared on yet another talk show, armed with new details about Jasmine's alleged misconduct. "Let me be clear. I'm not doing this because I hate her," Marjorie said, leaning forward earnestly. "I'm doing this because the American people deserve transparency. If we allow politicians to get away with unethical behavior, what kind of example are we setting?" Her words resonated with many viewers, solidifying her image as a crusader for accountability. Supporters praised her boldness, hailing her as a hero willing to take on powerful figures regardless of the backlash. Detractors accused her of exploiting the situation for personal gain, but even they couldn't deny her effectiveness. As the week wore on, Jasmine's isolation deepened. Friends stopped returning her calls, and colleagues avoided her in the halls of Congress. Conversations that once flowed easily now felt strained and awkward. It was as if an invisible wall had formed around her, separating her from the world she once navigated so effortlessly. One evening, unable to sleep, Jasmine wandered into her living room and turned on the TV. Flipping through channels, she stumbled upon a late-night comedy show where the host was roasting her performance during the debate. The audience laughed uproariously as clips of her unraveling played on screen. Jasmine watched in silence, tears streaming down her face. She grabbed the remote and switched off the TV, retreating back to her bedroom. In moments like these, she questioned whether continuing to fight was worth it. The weight of the scandal felt unbearable, pressing down on her chest like a heavy stone. Yet despite everything, a small part of her refused to give up. She reminded herself of the people who still believed in her, the constituents who had voted for her, the volunteers who had knocked on doors for her campaign, the families counting on her to deliver change. "I didn't come this far to quit, now," she whispered to herself, staring at her reflection in the mirror. "If I stop fighting, then they win." But as dawn broke the next morning, Jasmine realized that survival wouldn't be easy. The road ahead was littered with obstacles, each one more daunting than the last. Allies had abandoned her, enemies had closed ranks, and the public's trust seemed irreparably broken. Still, she vowed to keep pushing forward, clinging to the hope that redemption might still be possible, even if it felt like a distant dream. For now, though, she remained trapped in a storm of her own making, battered by winds of doubt and fear. Whether she could weather it or would ultimately succumb remained uncertain. But one thing was clear: the battle for her reputation was far from over. By the fifth day, Jasmine Crockett was running on fumes. Sleep had become a distant memory, replaced by restless nights spent staring at the ceiling or scrolling through endless streams of negative headlines. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, each one delivering another blow to her already fragile state. Reporters hounded her for statements, critics mocked her online, and even strangers passing by on the street gave her disapproving looks. The weight of the scandal was crushing her piece by piece. Her team, dwindling in numbers, tried to rally around her, but their morale was as low as hers. Meetings that once buzzed with energy now felt like somber gatherings where everyone avoided eye contact. Suggestions were made: hire a crisis manager, issue another apology, focus on policy achievements, but none of them seemed strong enough to turn the tide. Jasmine listened quietly, nodding occasionally, but deep down, she felt lost. Every idea sounded like grasping at straws, desperate attempts to salvage what little remained of her reputation. In moments of solitude, Jasmine allowed herself to break down completely. She sat alone in her office, surrounded by half-empty coffee cups and scattered papers, replaying the debate over and over in her mind. What could she have done differently? Should she have stayed calm instead of lashing out? Could she have denied the allegations more convincingly? These questions haunted her, gnawing at her confidence until she barely recognized the person she used to be. Her frustration boiled over during one particularly heated meeting with her remaining advisors. "Why isn't anything working?" she demanded, slamming her fist on the table. "We've apologized, we've explained, we've tried everything, and yet people still hate me. What else do you want from me?" Her team exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond. One advisor cautiously suggested stepping away from the spotlight temporarily, letting the storm pass before attempting a comeback. "Sometimes silence speaks louder than words," he said gently. "If you keep fighting back right now, it might just make things worse." Jasmine bristled at the suggestion. "So I'm supposed to just disappear? Let them win while I sit here doing nothing? Is that your brilliant strategy?" "It's not about letting anyone win," the advisor replied calmly. "It's about preserving yourself. You can't fight effectively if you're burned out and overwhelmed." The advice made sense logically, but emotionally, it felt like surrender. Jasmine had always prided herself on resilience, on standing tall no matter the odds. The thought of retreating, even briefly, went against everything she believed in. Yet, as much as she hated to admit it, she knew they were right. She wasn't functioning at her best anymore. Her responses were reactive rather than strategic, fueled by anger and fear rather than clear thinking. That evening, Jasmine decided to take a step back, at least publicly. She canceled all upcoming appearances and interviews, issuing a brief statement thanking her supporters for their patience and promising to address the situation further when the time was right. It wasn't an admission of guilt, nor was it a full retreat. It was a pause, a chance to breathe amidst the chaos. Behind closed doors, however, Jasmine's mental health continued to deteriorate. She spent hours pacing her house, replaying conversations in her head and obsessing over every detail of the scandal. Paranoia crept in, making her question everyone's motives. Was her assistant secretly leaking information to the press? Had her lawyer stopped believing in her innocence? Even routine interactions felt loaded with hidden meaning. One night, unable to shake off the anxiety gripping her chest, Jasmine picked up her phone and dialed her mother's number. They hadn't spoken much since the scandal broke, partly because Jasmine didn't want to burden her family with her problems. But tonight, she needed someone who wouldn't judge her, someone who loved her unconditionally. "Mom," she began, her voice cracking almost immediately. "I don't know what to do anymore. Everything is falling apart and I feel so alone." Her mother listened patiently, offering words of comfort without pushing for details. "Honey, life has its ups and downs," she said softly. "You've faced tough times before, and you've always come out stronger. This is just another chapter, not the whole book." The conversation brought Jasmine some measure of peace, reminding her of simpler days when success wasn't measured by poll numbers or media coverage. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond politics, a quiet existence free from scrutiny and judgment. But reality quickly snapped her back. Quitting wasn't an option, not yet anyway. She owed it to herself, to her supporters, and to the people who had placed their trust in her. As the week drew to a close, federal investigators announced they would be launching a formal inquiry into Jasmine's activities based on Marjorie Taylor Greene's revelations. The news hit like a thunderclap, sending shockwaves through both political circles and the general public. While no charges had been filed yet, the mere mention of an investigation sent Jasmine spiraling deeper into despair. She spent the weekend holed up in her home, avoiding all contact with the outside world. Her staff urged her to prepare for the worst-case scenario, including potential legal battles and financial fallout. But Jasmine couldn't bring herself to think that far ahead. Each day felt like walking through quicksand, every decision weighed down by uncertainty. Meanwhile, Marjorie basked in the attention, positioning herself as a champion of transparency and accountability. She appeared on multiple platforms, discussing the importance of holding leaders responsible for their actions. Supporters praised her boldness, while detractors accused her of exploiting the situation for personal gain. Regardless of opinions, there was no denying the impact she'd had on Jasmine's career and on the broader political landscape. For Jasmine, the contrast between her current reality and Marjorie's triumph was painful to witness. Where she once stood confidently at podiums, Commanding rooms with her presence, she now found herself shrinking under the weight of criticism and doubt. Pride kept her clinging to hope, but fear whispered that this might be the end of her journey. Still, she refused to give up entirely. In quiet moments, she reminded herself of why she entered politics in the first place: to help people, to create change, to leave a legacy worth remembering. Those ideals may have been overshadowed by scandal, but they weren't gone completely. If she could hold on long enough, maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild what had been broken. As dawn broke on Monday morning, Jasmine stared out her window, watching the sun rise over the city skyline. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges she couldn't fully anticipate. But she squared her shoulders, took a deep breath, and resolved to face whatever came next, one step at a time. By the 6th day, the scandal had taken on a life of its own. It wasn't just about Jasmine Crockett anymore. It was a full-blown media spectacle, dissected and debated by everyone from late-night comedians to political analysts. The narrative had shifted in ways no one could have predicted. What started as accusations of financial misconduct had morphed into something bigger, a story about power, accountability, and the fragility of trust. Jasmine woke up that morning feeling like a shadow of her former self. Her reflection in the mirror told a story she barely recognized: dark circles under her eyes, hair unkempt, shoulders slumped with exhaustion. She hadn't eaten much in days, surviving mostly on coffee and takeout meals brought by her dwindling staff. Once known for her sharp wit and commanding presence, she now struggled to summon even the smallest spark of energy. The federal investigation loomed over everything, casting a long, ominous shadow. Investigators had begun reaching out to people connected to Jasmine, former staffers, campaign donors, even acquaintances, to piece together a clearer picture of her actions. Each new development sent fresh waves of panic through her camp. Every knock at the door or unexpected phone call felt like it might bring bad news. Her legal team worked tirelessly, poring over documents and preparing for every possible outcome. They urged her to cooperate fully with investigators, stressing that transparency would be key to mitigating the damage. But cooperation came with risks too. Admitting fault, even partially, could open the floodgates to further scrutiny and potentially destroy whatever shred of credibility she had left. Outside, her immediate circle, public opinion continued to tilt heavily against her. Calls for her resignation grew louder, echoed by both opponents and neutral observers alike. Some argued that staying in office while under investigation would undermine the integrity of the system. Others simply saw her as damaged goods, unfit to represent anyone given the allegations swirling around her. Despite the mounting pressure, Jasmine refused to step down, at least not yet. "I didn't do anything illegal," she told her closest confidants during a rare moment of vulnerability. "Yes, I made mistakes, who hasn't? But I'm not going to let them bully me into quitting." Her defiance was admirable, but it also isolated her further. Allies who might have defended her publicly stayed silent, unwilling to risk association with someone embroiled in such controversy. Even her strongest supporters seemed hesitant to rally behind her, unsure whether defending her would reflect poorly on them too. Meanwhile, Marjorie Taylor Greene continued to dominate the headlines. She appeared on talk shows, gave interviews, and posted updates on social media, always framing herself as a crusader for justice. Critics accused her of grandstanding, claiming she cared more about scoring political points than seeking truth. But none of that mattered to Marjorie, or to the growing number of people cheering her on. "I'm not here to make friends," Marjorie said during one particularly fiery interview. "I'm here to hold people accountable. If that makes me unpopular, so be it. At least I can sleep at night knowing I stood up for what's right." Her words resonated with many viewers, solidifying her image as a fearless provocateur willing to challenge the status quo. Supporters praised her boldness, hailing her as a hero unafraid to take on powerful figures. Detractors dismissed her as opportunistic, accusing her of exploiting the situation for personal gain. Regardless of opinions, there was no denying the impact she'd had, not only on Jasmine's career but also on the broader political landscape. For Jasmine, Watching Marjorie thrive while she floundered was almost unbearable. Pride kept her from admitting defeat outright, but fear whispered constantly in the back of her mind. What if this was the end of her journey? What if all her hard work, all her sacrifices, amounted to nothing? In moments of doubt, Jasmine tried to remind herself of why she entered politics in the first place. She thought about the families counting on her to deliver change, the volunteers who had knocked on doors for her campaign, the communities she had promised to uplift. Those ideals may have been overshadowed by scandal, but they weren't gone completely. Somewhere deep inside, she still believed in them, even if believing felt harder than ever. One evening, unable to face another round of negative headlines, Jasmine decided to take a walk. She slipped out of her house unnoticed, pulling her hoodie over her head to avoid recognition. The streets were quiet, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. For the first time in days, she felt a semblance of peace, a brief escape from the chaos consuming her life. As she strolled past empty parks and closed shops, Jasmine allowed herself to reflect. She thought about the choices that led her here, the compromises she made, the lines she crossed, the pressures she succumbed to. Some decisions had seemed harmless at the time, small shortcuts taken to keep moving forward. Others were deliberate, born out of ambition and a desire to succeed at any cost. Now those choices weighed heavily on her conscience, reminding her how easily success could slip away. When she returned home, Jasmine sat down at her kitchen table and pulled out a notebook. For hours, she wrote furiously, pouring her thoughts onto paper. She jotted down ideas for rebuilding trust, strategies for addressing the allegations, plans for reconnecting with her constituents. Writing helped her organize her chaotic thoughts, giving her a sense of control amidst the uncertainty. The next morning, Jasmine called a meeting with her remaining team. She walked in looking calmer than she had in days, carrying the notebook, filled with her scribbled notes. "Listen," she began, her voice steady despite the fatigue etched on her face. "I know things look bad right now. Maybe they are bad. But I'm not ready to give up. Not yet. We've got work to do." Her determination inspired her team, reigniting their resolve to fight alongside her. Together, they outlined a plan. Focus on transparency, engage directly with constituents, and emphasize policy achievements rather than personal attacks. It wouldn't erase the scandal overnight, but it was a start. A glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. Over the following weeks, Jasmine slowly began clawing her way back. She held town hall meetings, answering tough questions from skeptical attendees. She visited community centers, listening to concerns and promising action. And she issued regular updates on social media, sharing progress reports and owning up to past mistakes without deflecting blame. It wasn't easy. Criticism continued to pour in, and trust remained fragile. But slowly, incrementally, some people started seeing glimpses of the leader they once supported, the fighter who refused to back down, even when the odds were stacked against her. Marjorie, for her part, watched the developments with a mix of satisfaction and curiosity. She had achieved what she set out to do: expose wrongdoing and spark a national conversation about accountability. Whether Jasmine survived the fallout or crumbled under the pressure remained to be seen. Either way, Marjorie knew she had left her mark, a testament to the power of persistence and conviction. As the dust settled, both women emerged changed by the experience. For Marjorie, it reinforced her belief in speaking truth to power regardless of the consequences. For Jasmine, it served as a humbling reminder of the importance of integrity and the steep price of losing it. Neither woman walked away unscathed, but both understood one thing clearly. In the world of politics, where reputations rise and fall like tides, resilience is the only currency that truly matters. And though their paths diverged sharply after the scandal, neither would soon forget the lessons learned or the storm that tested them both.